afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Removing the Shackles. Today, we're doing our introduction to homeopathy with my wonderful friend, Miss Ann Callaghan, over there, who the Unfuckers know exceptionally well. She will be new to the RKX TV members. Ann is one of my best friends, and she is a ridiculous wealth of knowledge. And when it comes to homeopathy, there is no one better, in my opinion, to talk on the subject. So we're going to dive in because Anne's going to explain what homeopathy is and what it isn't, because there's a lot of confusion about that. So hi, Anne. How you doing?
Hi, Danny, and everyone. Yeah, so I reckon we need to do a few shows on this, and what I want to do tonight is just talk about the origins of homeopathy, the principles, the history and development of homeopathy, and the fall of homeopathy as well in the US particularly. So
yeah.
It's interesting because it sort of ties in with the notion of reset as well. You know, it's all started to go down in the 1900s, 1920s. So I'll share
reset.
my screen.
Yes, you share screen. You can take us through all the stuff.
John, I hope I can. I'll share screen. Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask everyone in our live audience, just hold questions. Once we're finished going through the stuff with Anne, save your questions, and then we'll have a little question and answer period afterwards. And of course, anyone watching the video afterwards, if you have questions for Anne, you can send them to me, and we'll make sure they're addressed in the next homeopathy discussion.
What can you see on your screen at the moment?
Nothing. I can see you, my darling. I can only see you.
You can see me frowning, wondering where it's gone. Oh yeah, here we are. Share, hopefully. Good.
There we go. Good.
Yeah, I haven't. This is not what I normally use.
Do you want a different? Is there a different one that you want to use?
I can't know. We'll get back there. This computer is older than the one I normally do things off. So.
There we go.
Okay. And I can still see the chat. So you probably have lots of questions, and like Danny says, we can try and address them later. So it's an introduction to homeopathy, part 1. And the word homeopathy, the word is actually a stumbling block for a lot of people because it begins with an H, and a lot of people think it's the same as, you know, homeopathy. This is, you know, like herbalism. It's a natural kind of medicine, isn't it? But actually, homeopathy, as you'll learn, is very different to herbalism. And we don't necessarily use just plant matter to make the remedies. So the word homeopathy is made up of the Greek words homos, meaning similar, and pathos, meaning disease. Conceived by the German doctor Samuel Hahnemann in 1796, so the very end of the 1700s. And the principle, the first principle of homeopathy, the law of similars, similia similibus curenter, what can cause can cure. So you see down there someone with a very red, shiny face, red, shiny eye, swollen. That's what you could look like if you have a bee sting. So we would often use the remedy apis to treat a symptom like that, a very red, shiny, swollen part. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. We choose the remedies, the law, according to this law, the law of similars, what can cause can also cure. So this is the guy, Samuel Hahnemann, who's considered to be the father of homeopathy. He was born in Meissen, Germany. His dad was a porcelain painter. He worked in the Meissen porcelain factory, and they were, they were okay, but they weren't very well off. And he wanted his son to do better than he did, and pushed him really hard. So he studied languages while he was a child. He was fluent in at least 7. Then he went on to study medicine and graduated in 1779, but he gave up his practice in 1784. As Danny has, I know, spoken about, the medicine of the time was what we would consider pretty barbaric.
Poison.
Poison, yeah. Bloodletting, really, really nasty stuff. So Hahnemann said, my sense of duty would not easily allow me to treat the unknown pathological state of my suffering brethren with these unknown medicines. The thought of becoming in this way a murderer or malefactor towards the life of my fellow human beings was most terrible to me, so terrible and disturbing that I wholly gave up my practice in the first years of my married life and occupied myself solely with chemistry and writing. He was a bit of a polyglot. He was a very good chemist, a linguist, as I've mentioned, and had a very inquiring mind. He'd have been definitely an errant or an unfucker. There's no question about that. Now, this law that he worked off, the law of similars, we have to point out that this is not peculiar to Hahnemann. This is a law that had been mentioned by Hippocrates, for instance, in the way back. Hippocrates said there were 2 methods of healing: contraries and similars. Natural forces within us are the true healers of disease. So Hippocrates made mention of this, you can heal with similars, and he also made mention of this note, the idea that we have within us a healing energy. Natural forces within us are the true healers of disease. So the idea that we have an immune system and we are able to heal ourselves. Paracelsus then also talked about like being able to cure like. He was much later. All things are poison and nothing is without poison. Only the dose makes a thing, not a poison. So he was also alluding to the notion that you can use a very tiny dose of something to heal. So, Hahnemann, with his extensive reading and writing, it probably, and most likely, he had come across these ideas. The law of similars was also used by the Mayans, Chinese, Greeks, Native American Indians, and Asian Indians. So it's accidentally used by allopathy sometimes. For instance, use of radiation to heal cancer, because radiation causes and can heal. The use of amphetamines to treat hyperactivity, that's another accidental use of the law of similars in allopathic medicine. So Hahnemann's development of homeopathy, so he started experimenting in 1790. What happened was that he made a living translating medical books and books on chemistry. And he came across this book by an English Dr. Cullen. And Cullen said that the reason cinchona bark cured malaria was because of its astringent properties. And Hahnemann said, that's a load of rubbish. There's loads of things that are more astringent than that, and they don't cure malaria. So he reckoned there had to be more to it. So he started taking material doses of this bark and discovered that he could produce in himself the symptoms of malaria. And that was the first proving ever done. And he spent the following 6 years doing provings on family and friends. It would have been whoopee time to be a friend of his, I'd imagine. Here, dear, have this dose of mercury. It's lovely. they were very brave, the early provers, because, you know, when you prove a homeopathic remedy, you produce the symptoms of the disease in yourself. And we'll talk about a bit about proving after, but, you know, they were very, very brave. They would go put themselves through these artificial diseases. The proving stops, generally speaking, when you stop taking the medicine, but it's still very uncomfortable at times. So 1801, you see, the thing about using poisons, and, you know, poisons are the obvious thing to cause a symptom, something that, you know, so the early homeopaths would have used known poisonous substances quite often, but they had to be diluted and diluted so that they didn't actually kill the patient. And after a period of time, they become so weak that they're no use at all. So in 1801, that's when Hahnemann first wrote about this potentization. He realized that serial dilutions got weaker and weaker. So he introduced this period of banging between dilutions. This is called succussion. And this is how you make a remedy stronger. We still don't really understand exactly what that does, but it works. And then in 1828, he wrote about miasms. And this was because sometimes the indicated remedy didn't work, and Hahnemann realized this could have been because of inherited tendencies, inherited disease patterns, constitutional weakness, if you like. And this is a place where homeopathy really differs from other systems of medicine. It's because a homeopath can address what you've come in with, the weakness in your constitution, and make that stronger. Okay. So for all the archaic booky people, he published a complete account of his theories for the first time in his book, The Organon of the Art of Healing, in 1810. This book contains 294 aphorisms. Aphorisms are statements of truth, of principles. So he based his practice on these 294 aphorisms. And they become, it's a system. Homeopathy is a system of medicine based on principles. Now, if you ask, and another, you know, if you ask an allopathic doctor, you know, what are the principles behind your treatment, they actually can't tell you because they don't have a system of principles. And then he later published Materia Medica Pura, in which all the pharmacological substances were written up. That was one of the earliest, but if not the earliest, Materia Medica. I'm going to read out some of what he said in his aphorisms, because I think it's really interesting. The first principle was, the physician's high and only mission is to restore the sick to health, to cure, as it is termed. And this was a footnote. He was, oh my God, wrote loads and loads of footnotes, almost more than the aphorisms. But this footnote is, his mission is not, however, to construct so-called systems by interweaving empty speculations and hypotheses concerning the internal, essential nature of the vital processes and the mode in which diseases originate in the invisible interior of the organism, whereon so many physicians have hitherto ambitiously wasted their talents and their time. He had no time for people sitting around trying to analyze, for instance, what is going on. He said the patient dies while you try and decide what's happening. Nor is it to attempt to give countless explanations regarding the phenomena in diseases and their proximate cause, which must ever remain concealed, wrapped in unintelligible words. You know, we can relate this to Danny's experience and to, you know, to modern medicine. And an inflated abstract mode of expression, which should sound very learned in order to astonish the ignorant, while sick humanity sighs in vain for aid. Of such learned reveries, to which the name of theoretic medicine is given, and for which special professorships are instituted, we have had quite enough. It is now high time that all who call themselves physicians should at length cease to deceive suffering mankind with mere talk, and begin now instead, for once, to act, that is, really to help and to cure. That could have been written for today.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to jump in here and say that this is so important, because one of the biggest failures we have today, especially if you're someone who does any kind of natural healing, is people will be like, well, how does it work? And scientists will they'll sit there and they'll say, chamomile helps people sleep. Well, how does it work? And then they take it apart and they do the studies and they extract and they write studies and do research and they get grants, etc. And in the end run, who cares?
That's
the only thing that matters is that it works. If it works, we use it. And when we can they get caught up in this, well, why does it work? Well, and if we can't prove why it works, well, then it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It's ridiculous. Like, no. We have the proof that it works. We don't need to know why it works. Like you were saying about him with the bark, right? The very first, that bit of the bark, which I can't remember the name of.
Cinchona bark. China is the name of the remedy, actually. China.
Oh, now I know.
That, probably.
Awesome. I have that remedy. But yeah, like now he didn't need, like, it doesn't make sense to go into this whole dissertation of how and why and where, and it just works.
Yeah, exactly. Aphorism number 2, and I think this is really beautiful as well. The highest ideal of cure is rapid, gentle, and permanent restoration of the health, or removal and annihilation of the disease in its whole extent, in the shortest, most reliable, and most harmless way, on easily comprehensible principles. And number 9 in particular, this is his number 9, actually is my favorite one. It's his definition of health. You know, what are we doing in a physical body? In the healthy condition of man, the spiritual vital force, autocracy, the dynamis that animates the material body, the organism, rules with unbounded sway and retains all the parts of the organism in admirable, harmonious, vital operation as regards both sensations and functions, so that our indwelling, reason-gifted mind can freely employ this living, healthy instrument for the higher purposes of our existence. Now, this is one of the reasons homeopathy was shut down, of course, because they didn't want people who were able to employ their reason-gifted mind for the higher purposes of their existence. Yeah, that's a lovely one. Okay, so the evolution of homeopathic practice, having started in Germany, Hahnemann was a cantankerous old git. There's no two ways about it. You know, he got up the nose of everybody. And the pharmacies hated him because he made his own medicine, and he was, you know, he did get into fights with people, and things were very rocky. He had to keep moving around a lot. And actually the evolution of homeopathic practice moved to America. The focus of early homeopathy sort of moved from Europe over to America. And we have Constantine Herring between 1800 and 1880, who was he was a genius. He was a brilliant doctor, and he was actually employed by the allopaths to take homeopathy down. They wanted him to investigate it and prove that it didn't work. But actually, because he was brilliant and he was a scientist, a proper doctor, he did a proper investigation and became completely, enthralled with homeopathy. And he developed what we called the law of cure. And he also made the first nosode from the sputum of a person diagnosed with tuberculosis. So as you can see, we can make homeopathic remedies from anything. Nosodes are remedies that are made from disease process, and they're very useful for dealing with inherited disease, miasmatic disease. And yes, Dawn, I just saw she said he was a true unfucker. Absolutely, this is Hahnemann. He was a true unfucker. So Herring, Tyler Kent was another very famous homeopath. He developed the use of really high potencies, really high potencies, and wrote Materia Medica with developed constitutional types. The constitutional types go into depth about a person's personality. So we're never just looking at a disease name in homeopathy. We're looking at what we call the totality of symptoms, the person's mental, emotional symptoms, as well as physical symptoms. So Tyler Kent went into detail writing about these constitutional types, and these are books that homeopaths, we still, I forgot to bring my books today, funny enough, but we still yeah, looking at all Chinese being an archaic kind of show. I should have brought the books, but I forgot to. Yeah, we still study the organon. We still study these books that were written so long ago. They're as valid today as they were then. They haven't changed. The theory has evolved to a certain extent. We use slightly different potencies, even higher potencies now, perhaps, but the theory has not changed. So look at that. Pittsburgh Homeopathic Hospital, 1866. Despite significant oppression from the Orthodox, homeopathy survived and thrived in the 1800s and the early 1900s. By 1900, there were 22 homeopathic medical schools, more than 100 homeopathic hospitals, 60, and this is funny, orphan trains, right? Orphan asylums where homeopathy was used. Isn't that interesting? And old people's homes, and 1,000 plus homeopathic pharmacies in the US. That comes from, if anyone wants to read more about this history, Coulter wrote a very good history of homeopathy in America, Transaction of the American Institute of Homeopathy. So yeah, it would have, it was a very interesting time for homeopathy. But as you can see, it does sort of fit into this reset, the takedown. One of the places where homeopathy was most successful was in the treatment of epidemics. And you can see here, typhus, 1813, conventional mortality, 30%, homeopathic, 1.5, cholera, 1830, 40% conventional mortality, 7 to 10 with homeopathic treatment. And the cholera of 1854, there was 59% conventional, 9% with homeopathy, and so on. You can see those extraordinary figures, really, for comparison. Right up to the Spanish, so-called Spanish flu in 1918, and that's at a time when homeopathy was seriously under attack, and they still managed a difference, huge difference there. You can see the conventional mortality 30%, homeopathic treatment 1.5%. So the fall of homeopathy in the US. Hahnemann's principles posed a philosophical, clinical, and economic threat to orthodox medicine and had to be taken down. In 1846, a medical group formed which vowed to slow the development of homeopathy, and that organization was called the AMA, the American Medical Association. So it was actually set up to take homeopathy down. Now, this is an interesting one, and we see this in lots of places. Perhaps homeopathy could have been changed if J.D. Rockefeller, a strong advocate of homeopathy, gave the major grants he intended to homeopathic institutions. He used homeopathy himself. He was treated into his, I think he died, he was 91 or something. He was treated with homeopathy all the way. And this is interesting in terms of names. He had instructed his financial advisor, Frederick Gates, to do so. Since Gates was totally enamored with orthodox medicine, he never complied with Rockefeller's orders. The loss of potential funding was tragic, since Rockefeller gave away between 300 and 400 million, imagine how much that was in the early 1900s, most of which went to orthodox medical institutions. That comes from the book Rockefeller's Medicine Men. Somebody's saying King Chucky. Yes, exactly. Homeopathy only survived in England as long as it did because of royal patronage. And that's always been a strange one for me. You know, on the one hand, we know these guys. I mean, Rockefeller went on to really put a huge amount of money into pharmaceutical medicine. The royal families all use homeopathy, always have. The Queen had her own homeopathic physician until a few years before she died. He mysteriously either was killed himself falling off his bicycle. So we do wonder what he might have seen that he shouldn't have. Okay, so that's a background. What else do I want to say about that? Oh, what was it I wanted to say? Yeah, well, basically funding was withdrawn or from the medical schools that taught homeopathy. You couldn't join the AMA if you were a homeopath. They just took away, they stripped all the rights of people who used homeopathy, who studied homeopathy, and it was very, very difficult. And at the same time, some of the new sort of wonder drugs were being developed, which looked like they might be really very useful, easy to use. And you know, a lot of the homeopaths, homeopathy is difficult, you know, it takes time to find a remedy sometimes. So between one thing and another, homeopathy went into a serious decline and has only really sort of started to come back in the 1970s. So this is just want to go through some terminology that you hear me using in probably other talks about homeopathy. Approving is giving a substance in potency to a group of healthy humans to find out what the substance can do. Provings, certainly the old provings were very, very in-depth. Danny, yeah?
And can you define potency for us?
Okay, that is
Is that farther down in the list?
We'll get to
Okay.
potency. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll shut up again.
Okay. Well, thank you for pointing out, because sometimes I don't really know what people know and what they don't know in terms of the terminology. But yeah, so when a proving is done, there's usually about 20 or 30 people. You take the substance in a homeopathic dilution over a period of time, and you write down minutely how you feel, what happens to you, all the sensations in your body, what food you want, what dreams you have, any fears that come up, any changes to your mental emotional state. And all of this information at the end of the proving is then collated into a body of work, and that will be called the materia medica for that particular substance. So yeah, materia medica, proving symptoms are collated to form a picture of what a substance can cause and therefore cure. A repertory is a directory of symptoms. Now, and Danny has seen mine. It's enormous. Most homeopaths these days would use computer programs because they're just much faster. But in the old days, we all used these great big books, directories of symptoms. And then to repertorize is to cross-reference the person's symptoms with the aim of finding a matching remedy. So when something is, when people first hear about homeopathy, they often say, oh, what's the remedy for a headache? And just go, okay, there's probably about a couple of thousand that can make that can potentially cause a headache. So we have to get detailed information about, okay, what does it feel like? Where is it? Did anything happen before it started, and so on and so on. And we cross-reference this information to come up with a match, a similar remedy that can match the person's symptoms. So
and a lot of the questions that Anne will ask people seem so irrelevant. Like you could be asking about a headache and it'll be like, how many poos have you had this week? And what color is your urine? And how do you smell? And do you have any itches anywhere? Because it is literally every aspect of the person, right? And like it's everything. We're so used to it being, you have a headache, you take a Panadol or Tylenol, and that's not the way it works.
No, not the way it works at all. We look at the whole person, and very particularly the mental emotional situation. Did anything happen? Did anything happen to to change, to dis-ease your frequency, to put your frequency out of balance? Did something happen? Very, very important. Sari is saying she saw a doctor in the 90s. Yeah. Okay, so the principles, and it's really important to know these principles, because this is homeopathy, really. So the first one, like cures like. So you choose a remedy that is a match for the person's symptoms, not a match for the named disease, but a match for the person's symptoms. You give that remedy in a minimum dose. So you give it in the smallest appropriate dose. And I'll talk about potency now in a couple of minutes. And then you evaluate the direction, you evaluate the efficacy of the remedy according to the law of direction of cure. So that is really, really important. We know when we give a homeopathic remedy whether it's working the right way or whether it is actually suppressing a symptom. And I'll talk about that in a minute as well. So like cures like cures like cures like. That's very easy to get in your head. Match a person's symptoms to a remedy that produces similar symptoms. For instance, the onion, Allium cepa, can alleviate, it makes your eyes stream, right? So someone who's got streaming eyes, as for instance, as part of hay fever, could well match to Allium cepa. Like cures like. The minimum dose. Now, I scabbed that off the internet. It's obvious. I didn't do it myself. That says natural substance. That's not accurate. That just should say substance, because we can make a remedy out of anything. We can make a remedy out of minerals, all the kingdoms, animal, vegetable, mineral. We have imponderable remedies made from the sun, from magnetism, from electricity, from X-ray. We can potentize vaccines, for instance, medications. If someone got very sick after a particular medication, we might end up making a potency out of that medication. So here we have a very basic notion of the dilutions. So you have your mother tincture, whatever that is. If you're talking about a plant, it's something that Danny would be familiar with. And you'd have to read the Materia Medica to find out exactly how the plant tincture was made. It could be the whole plant, the leaves, etc., etc. So you take just the one drop of that and you put it into 99 drops of pure alcohol. And then you bang that and you take one drop out of that and put it into 99, bang that, and so on and so on. And when you get to about the 12C, when you've done that about 12 times, you get to the point where it's you get to what's known as Avogadro's number, where it's unlikely that there's even a single molecule of the original substance left. So this is why you know, when allopaths are trying to take homeopathy down, they say, oh, there's nothing in it. It's placebo. There's nothing in it. That's because they don't understand dynamization. They don't understand that the water or the alcohol is actually picking up. Sarah's saying, I thought it was in water. It can be as it goes further. They don't understand energy. They don't understand that the energetic imprint of something can be carried forward.
They don't understand frequency at all.
No, no. And this, for me, is one of the most important ones. It's the law of cure. And even if we never used homeopathy, we can figure out a lot about ourselves by looking at the law of cure. And the thing is that, and this is what's missing completely in Orthodox medicine, is the idea that we are a self-organizing system. Otherwise, we'd have been long gone. You know, if we did not protect our innermost vital organs, then we would die. We would die. So when something happens to disturb our frequency, the body will make sure that it produces the balancing symptom in the safest possible place. It will protect the innermost at all costs. So most frequently, when you are disturbed, the symptoms appear first energetically. You know, you feel a little bit off in yourself, you know, like, oh, not having a great day. Now, if that goes on, it will somatize. And that is, it will become a physical symptom. And the body will most likely put the physical symptoms on the outside, if it can, on the skin. And when we, as homeopaths, when we first do a constitutional treatment, we have to ask about a person's experience from conception onwards. You know, how was the pregnancy? How was your birth? How, you know, we do a timeline of sickness. And so we can see very often when a child, for instance, will produce an eczema early on, that if that eczema is treated with cortisone steroid cream, the next thing that happens is that the disease goes inwards to the lungs, because there are correlations between the skin breathes. It's the biggest organ that breathes and expels toxins. And if that root, that body has tried to use that root to balance itself, and if that is stopped with cortisone or steroids, the body has no choice but to send that disease interior to the interior, and it goes to the lungs most frequently. There's another big correlation, and that's between the knees and the heart, that you very often see. Somebody goes to the doctor with, you know, with the dodgy knee, and they get a steroid injection, and the next thing you know is the heart is giving trouble, because there's a huge connection between the heart. If you get a good remedy in your, you know, if somebody goes to a homeopath with a heart problem, and they get a good remedy, quite often you'll find that the knee will act up for a little while, because the body will clear it down. And again, the symptoms often clear from the top down. You'll see that happening in childhood diseases, when the rash will very often heal from the top down. So when we've given a remedy, we evaluate the action of the remedy according to this law of cure. And then we know, is it really healing somebody, or is it, you know, just suppressing their symptoms? So if it's really healing, the cure will go from the inside to the outside. So sometimes you'll have somebody who's had a liver issue, for instance, and suddenly after the liver starts to heal out, they'll get a rash on the skin. And that's simply the body is detoxing now through the skin. Symptoms will move from more important to less important organs, and symptoms will heal in reverse order of appearance. Sometimes people do that during a constitutional treatment. They'll almost cycle back through everything they had in their life and get back to their original blueprint, if you like. Okay, I think that is it, is it? Yeah, it is. So I'll just stop sharing.
And I just want to put out this is a little aside for your last slide. So I've just gotten out of the hospital with a desperately bad infection and in my intestines. Last week, I had pimples coming up on my face. I like randomly pimples coming up all over my face. And I said to my eldest daughter, I said, there's something going on. When this is happening here, out of the blue, that is an indication that I've got an infection somewhere else in my body. And then you get busy and you don't think about it. And then a week later, boom, infection.
Yeah, stress. And you know, we're all, especially all of us, we are all under a lot of stress at the moment, in every kind of way. So we really have to look after ourselves. So there's just the basic principles of homeopathy, and I wanted to share those. They're not, you know, when you go to use homeopathic remedies down the line, I suppose with these programs, we will talk about how you transition yourself, because as that sounds terrible, how you transition yourself in the current climate, but anyway, we need to take responsibility for our own health as much as we can. And we will be talking about the homeopathic first aid kit and how you can start to use it. I see you've got one behind you there, Danny, the Helios kit. Yeah. So if people are interested in learning about homeopathy, that would be a great kit to learn to use, because you can treat a lot of stuff yourself at home with that.
Oh, yeah. I use mine all the time. I have had a Helios kit for at least 12 years, and it goes everywhere with me. Like if we're traveling, it goes with me. When I'm go foraging, I take groups of people out foraging. It's in my first aid kit with me on hand at all times.
Yeah. Okay, so
maybe we can see if we talk Mary into coming and doing that with us.
Well, she said she would. I asked her. Yeah, she said she would.
So Mary Aspinwall is the amazing homeopath who actually created these kits, and she's a good friend of Anne's. So we're going to convince Mary to come on and talk about her kit and how it came about and how to use it, etc. That'd be awesome. Oh, that would be so awesome.
Yeah. She has a great group. If you're into, I know a lot of us are pulling away from Facebook, but she has a great group on Facebook. There's 44,000 people in it now, and a lot of resources, and a lot of help for people who are starting to use homeopathy at home. So was that gobbledygook, or did you get any of it?
Questions. You know what? I would like if you could expand a little bit more on the potentizing. You know, you've got like the ones, you have your C's that you're in there, but I know that we go into the M's and we
go into
X's and X's, and that is if you could kind of, because we commonly talk about 200C potency, 30C potency, 6C potency. Those are like the three most common, if you will, potencies.
Yeah.
Can you define the difference? It's a terrible word. The difference in strength?
Yeah. No,
that's not the right word. As to, and how we would decide between, say, 200C arnica or 30C arnica or 6C arnica.
Mm-hmm. I think that's in next week's talk, Danny. But anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, never mind. Okay, so C represents 100, right? X represents 10. So these are dilutions. The cell salts, and I know many of the unfuckers are are familiar with the cell salts. They are a dilution of 1 in 10, so they're material. Most often they're molecules, so you're getting a microdose of a nutrient when you take a cell salt, because there's still molecules in it. The higher potencies have absolutely no molecules in them at all, long gone. Now, dosage, I know, see Dawn saying I've always been confused by the dosing. Okay, so
am I, Dawn. So am I. That's why I just said, Anne, what dose do I make?
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of the kits are produced in 30C, right? Because 30C will usually do something. If it's a very intense, the birthing kit is produced in a 200C, because when you're giving birth, you're not worried about what's on Netflix or, you know, or anything else. You are completely involved in this process. So 200C is usually used for a situation where your entire being is focused on what is going on with you. Whereas a 30C can be, oh yeah, I've got a bit of a, you know, this and that, and it's, you know, but you're not completely focused on it, right? A 6C is for something that's quite slow moving, like you have a wart or something. It's not gonna, you know, it's taking very little of your time and attention, but it's, you know, it's a slow growing thing, and it'll move slowly. Where and then when we get into the mental emotional end of things, we'd often go for much higher potencies again.